The village of Bronston was always quiet after sunset. Even the dogs stopped barking as if they knew better. But in the last few weeks, something had changed. The air smelled different. Old. Burnt. Like incense and rot. And at the edge of the village, the Williams house lit up again after 9 years. No one had lived there since the fire, since the girl died. Ian had just moved in next door, unaware of the legends. He was a quiet man, grieving his mother's death. He wanted peace. But peace doesn't live near curses. The first night, he heard chanting. Low. Guttural. Like someone reciting Sanskrit, backwards. He asked the villagers the next day. They just looked at him, wide-eyed. One old man whispered, they opened it again. The asterisk kalika dwa asterisk. Ian didn't understand. But that night, he dreamt of ashes. Falling from the ceiling like snow. The next morning, he saw the ash. Real. In his room. On his pillow. But he had locked every door and window. And in the center of the ash was a black thread tied in 7 knots. The Williams house remained silent all day. But at dusk, the lamps lit themselves. And in one of the broken windows, Ian saw something. A girl, skin cracked like burnt bark, eyes glowing red. She smiled and vanished. Ian's health began to deteriorate. Dark bruises on his arms. Nosebleeds in his sleep. Voices in his ears at night whispering, asterisk, return what was taken. Asterisk. He didn't know what it meant. But every morning, his mother's photo was turned face down. Then came the dreams. Sacrifices. Children buried in clay pots. Eyes sewn shut. A woman with 8 arms pulling strings from a black altar. And in the center, the burnt girl. Waiting. Ian tried to leave. Packed his bag. Booked a taxi. But the driver refused. He pointed to the sky, black crows circling his roof. All exits are sealed, he said, until the debt is paid. The village priest came to him that night. An old man with milky eyes. He said only one thing. Don't answer the door after midnight. She knows your name now. And he left, crying. Midnight came. And with it, 3 knocks. Each louder. More demanding. Ian sat frozen, clutching his mother's scarf. Then he heard the whisper from the door. Asterisk, son. Asterisk. He didn't sleep. But the door opened by itself at dawn. And in the hallway was a small clay pot tied with black thread, oozing red fluid. Inside it, his mother's voice whispering in pain. The priest returned, this time with salt, lemons, and a black thread. He placed them around Ian's bed. You have 3 nights, or she takes your soul to the Davies garden. That night, Ian lit a lamp and prayed. But the shadows moved on their own. The walls pulsed like lungs. And at exactly 3:03 a.m., the mirror cracked. In it, he saw his mother, skinless, bleeding, begging him to wake up. He collapsed. Fainted from fear. When he woke, it was outside. Next to the Williams house. And the door was open. Candles burning inside, chanting calling his name. Inside, the air was thick with incense and blood. Black symbols smeared on walls. Goat skulls hanging from the ceiling. And in the center, the girl, eyes rolled back, levitating over a bed of ash. She opened her mouth. and Iron's mother's voice came out. "I never left, you brought me here." He screamed, but no sound came. Only blood pouring from his ears. The villagers found him the next morning, curled in a fetal position, covered in black ash and cuts, eyes wide open, but blind. He kept whispering, *, she forgives me now. She forgives me now, *. The Williams house burned down again that night. No fire trucks came. No one called. They just watched as the black flames rose silently. And in the smoke, a face smiled. Now, villagers don't go near that land. Grass never grows there. The crows never leave. And if you whisper Iron's name thrice, sometimes the ground still breathes. It started when Sarah and Michael moved into the old farmhouse on Hollow Creek Road. They wanted peace, quiet, space to raise their newborn daughter, Ella. But the house, it had its own memories. The walls whispered when the wind blew. The wood groaned even when no one walked. And in the basement, a smell lingered, like damp roots and old blood. On their first night, Ella wouldn't stop crying. Sarah rocked her for hours, but every time she passed the hallway mirror, Ella shrieked louder. Michael covered the mirror. Still, the cries continued, sharp, painful, unnatural. At 3:33 a.m., she stopped. Not asleep. Just wide-eyed. Staring at something behind her mother. The next morning, Sarah found markings under the crib. Carved deep into the wood, like claws. Strange symbols, circles and inverted figures. She showed Michael. He laughed nervously. Must have been here already. But Sarah didn't believe that. They looked fresh. Too fresh. At night, Michael dreamed of a woman with rotting skin. She stood at the foot of their bed, smiling, whispering things in Latin. He woke up drenched in sweat. But the worst part? His pillow was damp. With ***, mud ***. Black, wet mud. And a single strand of grey, wiry hair. They called a priest. He walked through the house, silent, pale. At the staircase, he stopped. And wouldn't go any further. He turned to them, trembling, and said, "She's still in the walls." Ella's eyes turned black that night. Not fully, just the pupils, wide, unnatural. She laughed while asleep. Not like a baby. Like something older. Deeper. She said a word Sarah didn't know. But the house groaned when she spoke it. Michael tried to tear the mirror from the wall. It wouldn't move. As if bolted from behind. Then it cracked, by itself. Not from force. From ***, something looking back ***. In the attic, Sarah found a box. Old photographs. A woman in black robes. Standing in this very house. Behind her, a table, covered in bones. Animal. And human. The woman was the previous owner. Margaret Wren. Accused of witchcraft in 1891. Burned, but not dead. Her body was never found. Just blood. And hair. That night, Sarah heard a voice behind her. Soft. Hissing. She turned. The mirror showed ***, Margaret ***. Standing behind her. Smiling. But when Sarah turned for real, nothing. Just cold. Michael stumbled back into the nursery, his breath catching as he saw the shadowy figure of the witch standing over Ella's crib. Her form was barely visible, a distortion in the air, but her long-clawed hand hovered above the baby's chest. Sarah screamed, rushing forward, only for the witch to vanish into the wall again, melting into the paint like smoke into the wind. Ella began to cry again, this time louder, more distressed. The lights flickered wildly as Sarah scooped her daughter up, holding her tightly. The air was colder than ever. Michael, his face pale, turned to Sarah and said, "We can't stay here tonight." They packed bags in silence. The only sound was the creaking of the house and Ella's sobs. Sarah clutched an old family photo that had fallen face down. When she turned it over, her hands trembled. There was a scratch across her own face, fresh, as if clawed by something not human. "She marked me," she whispered. Michael froze, realizing they were being hunted. As they moved toward the front door, every light in the house blew out simultaneously, plunging them into darkness. The shadows swelled. They heard a growl, not an animal, not human, something ancient and cold. Desperate, Michael turned on his phone flashlight. The beam barely cut through the thick dark, but what it revealed made Sarah choke in fear. Every picture on the wall had changed, faces in the frames were twisted in agony, eyes scratched out. The witch's mark, the same sigil from the attic, was burned into the wallpaper above Ella's crib. Michael yelled, "We need to go now." They ran to the front door, only to find it sealed shut, like part of the wall. Sarah pounded on it, screaming. From behind them, a low, guttural voice whispered, "You let me in, now you can't leave." Michael and Sarah rushed back upstairs to the attic, thinking maybe the portal or whatever it was could be reversed. The attic door creaked open by itself. Inside, the blackened sigil was pulsing now, alive, throbbing like a beating heart. As they entered, the attic trapdoor slammed shut behind them. Candles spontaneously lit around the room. In the center stood the witch, clearer than ever, decaying skin, eyeless sockets, mouth sewn shut with hair. Sarah shielded Ella's eyes. The witch raised her arms, and suddenly Sarah's body was flung back into the wall by an invisible force. Michael dropped to his knees, pleading with the witch. "Please? Take me, not them." His voice cracked. The witch tilted her head, her sewn lips twitching. She pointed at Ella. In that moment, Sarah, bruised and bleeding, screamed, "She wants the baby." A sharp pain shot through her abdomen, and she saw blood on her hands. She was losing consciousness. Michael stood between the witch and Ella, but the floorboards beneath him split open, swallowing him up into pitch darkness. His scream echoed, then silence. Sarah crawled to Ella, wrapping herself around her daughter. She sobbed, "Please, not my baby." The witch hovered above them, her claws twitching, ready. But Ella reached out, tiny fingers touching the sigil on the floor. It glowed blinding white. The witch screamed, a sound so shrill it cracked the attic windows. Light exploded outward from the child's touch, tearing through the witch's body. Her form disintegrated, sucked back into the wall behind the sigil, dragging her screams with her until silence fell. Silence. Sarah lay on the attic floor, holding Ella tightly. The candles were gone. The sigil had vanished. She whispered through tears, "You saved us." The attic door slowly creaked open by itself. Outside, the house was calm again. Birds chirped faintly. Sarah carried Ella down the stairs, every step painful but alive. She stopped at the nursery. Everything was back to normal. The family photos on the wall were smiling again. The scratch on her face had faded. But something inside Sarah knew it wasn't truly over. The next morning, Michael was found outside the house, unconscious but alive, covered in dirt. He couldn't explain where he'd been. "I was falling forever," he whispered. The family tried to move on. They painted over the attic walls, sealed it shut. But at night, Sarah still heard whispering from within. Ella never entered that room again. She would cry if they got too close. The house was quieter now, but not empty. On Ella's 5th birthday, she drew a picture of the attic. Crayon scribbled the witch with sewn lips and long hair. "She says she's still waiting," Ella whispered to Sarah. The room turned cold. The lights flickered, just for a second. Sarah held her daughter, heart pounding, realizing some doors never truly close. Not when they're invited in. And they had invited her long ago. Late one night, Sarah sat alone in the living room, staring at the blank TV. In its black reflection, she saw a flicker of movement behind her, a silhouette, tall, familiar, eyeless. She didn't turn. She just whispered, "I remember you too." The witch didn't respond. She simply waited, in silence, behind the wall. And Sarah knew the price was never fully paid. Jessica and Daniel had been searching for a quiet place to reset after their stillborn tragedy. They moved into a remote, moss-covered cabin deep in the Appalachian woods. Locals warned them, of course, about the land, said it used to belong to a woman named Eliza Crowley, burned alive for witchcraft. But grief makes people deaf. Jessica barely spoke, only stared at the fireplace for hours, her hand resting on her stomach as if Ella was still there. On their 3rd night, Daniel noticed the marks. Black, jagged lines forming beneath Jessica's skin, not tattoos, not bruises. They spread like roots under pale flesh. Jessica swore she didn't feel a thing. She just smiled for the first time in weeks and whispered, "She's almost here." Daniel found an old book beneath a floorboard in the attic, wrapped in decaying cloth. The cover was leather but pulsing, warm like skin. Inside were hand-drawn symbols and rituals. He couldn't read it, but one page had a sketch, Jessica's face, her eyes completely black. At night, Jessica would hum lullabies that didn't exist. The baby monitor, though unplugged, crackled with static and whispers. Daniel started sleeping in the truck. Every morning, Jessica greeted him with dried blood on her hands, and no memory of how it got there. One night Daniel followed Jessica into the woods. She walked barefoot, humming, the sigils on her body glowing under moonlight. He hid behind trees, heart pounding. At a clearing, Jessica whispered an incantation. And something * answered star. Something deep, low, wrong. The next morning, Jessica was back in bed, smiling. Daniel found claw marks on the trees, and his truck tires slashed open. He packed his bags. But every road out of the forest looped back to the cabin. No GPS, no phone signal. Only static. Only the whispers. He tried to burn the book. It screamed. The fire turned green. Jessica appeared in the smoke, holding Ella. But Ella had no face, only a black hole with teeth. Daniel ran into the storm, barefoot and bleeding, screaming for help. But the trees, they moved. Branches reached for him, roots tangled his legs. He passed out beneath a crooked oak, dreaming of Jessica breastfeeding something with horns. When Daniel awoke, his body was covered in blood, but none of it his. He staggered home, and on the porch sat a cradle. In it, not Ella, but a doll stitched from human skin, its mouth sewn shut with hair. Jessica cooed over it, singing in tongues. The walls bled that night. Daniel scratched at the sigils now appearing on his chest, bleeding ink and bile. he screamed, but Jessica only laughed. "You're part of her now," she whispered, as something moved under the floorboards, dragging nails. Michael decided to remove the boarded-up section of the basement wall. Behind the rotting wood and moldy stone, he found a crawl space, just large enough for a person to lie in. And lying there, half buried in dirt, was a leather-bound book, blackened, its cover carved with symbols he couldn't understand. When he touched it, the air turned cold, and a distant voice echoed in the stone. It whispered a name. 3 times. That night, Ella cried without stopping. Her crib shook. Not from wind. From something underneath. Sarah ran in, only to find claw marks on the floorboards below her crib, deep, fresh, splintering the oak. She screamed for Michael, but his voice came from the crawl space. Except, he was standing behind her. Michael started speaking in his sleep. The language wasn't English. It was guttural, cruel, like broken bones grinding together. Sarah recorded it, terrified. The audio file was only 2 minutes long, but when she played it back, it was nearly an hour. And in the background, a woman was laughing softly. Closer. And closer. Sarah tried to burn the book. It didn't catch fire. It screamed. A high-pitched, bone-splitting shriek that cracked the mirror above the mantel. Michael stood watching, expression blank, nose bleeding. The fire died instantly. The room turned ice cold. And the book was back on the kitchen table the next morning, clean, unopened. The house smelled of wet earth and copper. Sarah followed the stench to the attic. Inside, she found old baby clothes, burnt, with names sewn in red thread. Ella's name was there, already stitched. Sarah fell to her knees. Behind her, the attic door slammed shut. She wasn't alone anymore. Michael no longer recognized Sarah. He said she wore someone else's face. He whispered to shadows in the hallway, and they whispered back. He built a circle in the barn, candles, bones, something dark smeared in symbols. When Sarah confronted him, he said, "She's almost free. We just need the girl." Sarah took Ella and tried to leave. But the road bent the wrong way. No matter how far she drove, the signs all said Hollow Creek Road. The farmhouse was always behind the next turn. And the trees? They were watching her now, bark twisting, eyes opening slowly in the trunks. That night, Ella vanished. Her crib empty. The window wide open. Tiny footprints, bare, muddy, led back to the crawl space. Sarah followed, screaming. At the end of the crawl space, a woman stood. Long hair covering her face. She held Ella and smiled. The wall screamed as Sarah fought to reach her daughter. Michael stood beside the witch, smiling, chanting the name. "Valorna? Valorna? Valorna?" The room spun, reality cracked like glass. Sarah grabbed the book and screamed Ella's name. It pulsed, glowed, and shattered in a blast of light. Sarah woke in the middle of the field, sunlight warm, Ella in her arms. The farmhouse? Gone. Burnt to ash. Michael was never found. But at night, Sarah still hears scratching at her walls. And Ella? Sometimes she hums a lullaby Sarah never taught her, in a language no one should know.